previous edition of my podcast, I talked about the idea of corporate charity and why I was of a mind that that's not really a thing. But I want to talk about the entities that sell themselves as such. In other words, I want to kind of address this from another angle. And I want to talk a little bit, somewhat about my experience in that realm. And I also want to take the time just to sort of, in general, talk about how that all works out. So we're going to go ahead and go through that on today's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Thursday, the 3rd of February of 2022. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on my Facebook page, on minds.com, on locals.com, on Parler, and wherever else you happen to be seeing me today. Hope you're having a good day and that everything is going well for you. Remember that if you're watching me on Rumble, you can give me a boxing glove, which is a Rumble, and if you want to do that, so that's a thing that you can consider, as well as comment on my content if you want to do that, or give me a like or dislike on any of the content. Rumble is my preferred platform, as I've said before. Subject for today is more on corporate charity, and we are going to very quickly go through my notes so that we can talk about that. Excuse me, and you can have some idea exactly what it is that I'm trying to say today. I spent a season, not a particularly long one, working for what I would term a corporate charity. I'm not going to name names. Further, I'm not going to get into details on who they presented themselves to be and so forth, past to say that they truly looked like a real and meaningful entity where the type of entity they are is concerned. I also spent some time working in an entity termed a lockbox of a national banking chain. We process local utility payments, insurance premiums, and charitable contributions. Again, this was for a comparatively short period of time, but it was enough to get a pretty good taste for what was going on there. I'm sure there are differences between how one charitable entity and another do business. Keep in mind, though, people who manage and work in such entities often move from one to another. You also need to be aware there are rules that govern such usually non-profit companies. One thing I can tell you that you probably do not want to hear is that the one I worked directly for would assure you if you requested a given segment or part of what they support and represented to be beneficiary of your largesse. In truth, no such thing was going to happen. No matter what the person you talked to said was going to occur. In fact, though your contribution was supposed to be recorded as coming from you, in reality they had next to zero way to ensure that happened for much of what they took in. And in the lockbox, that was even less the case. They had even less way to do that. Your claiming you gave to that charity was more or less dependent on you getting some sort of receipt to that effect, because nothing else was probably going to prove that. Past that, nobody in the company really cared who you were or what you were giving. There were exceptions made for, quote, high rollers, end of quote. Those abnormalities were intended to give the folks in question warm fuzzies and convince them they were, quote, saving the world, end of quote, and that the folks they gave to actually cared. When the cameras were off, though, things pretty much went back to normal. The fact is, these entities are businesses. Non-profit or not, they're businesses. They have to have employees as a rule, and they virtually never run entirely on volunteers, and of that, you actually should be glad, believe it or not. Much of what the majority of them take in goes to administration. Very little typically goes to the causes in question. There are places you can go to fact check me on this. There used to be a place called something like give.org, I forget now, that was an example, and they would tell you, oh yeah, 25 or 15% actually goes to the charity. It may well be that some portion of the corporate charities out there have a better track record. Even if that's the case, I warn you now that's likely to change in the course of time. For this reason, on top of the ones I listed in my previous podcast talking about this subject, you should know I generally don't support corporate charities. Okay, there's my notes. Let me go on, get into the rest of the subject. Whatever you may think, the reality is that corporate charities do things that, if you knew what they were doing, would make it so that you seriously questioned whether or not it was a reasonable thing to give them anything for what they're doing. I'm not saying that there's no benefit that comes to the people, again, for whom they actually supposedly do their work. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that by and large, they have to support their entity. And again, I'm not going to get into names. I won't do that. You're going to have to do the research for yourself, and I'm not going to make it, quote, easy on you to avoid this one or that one, because you need to know what the particular entity that you're dealing with, if any, is doing. I will pick one out of the mix if I can think of their name. United Way. I'll pick United Way out of the mix. United Way is an organization that doesn't support a single cause. I don't mean they don't do anything for any cause. I mean, they support a spectrum of causes, some of them horribly bad and some of them, questionably good entities. My point is to say that if you're giving to United Way and they're like I expect them to be, there's no way to make sure that the money you're giving on any but a sort of a percentile basis, and even questionably then, is going to the people, what you're giving is going to the people that you want it to go to. For most other charities, they are specific to a given end. Not all of them, some of them are not, some of them are less so. But my point is to say that they at least try to be specific to a given end. Now, there are a couple of things about that. One is that they decide how that money is to be given, and that's, maybe an organization is split up into sectors, and you really would like money to go locally, or you would like money to go to a particular place that you believe has some need at that time, and that's, again, something you may or may not have happen. In fact, I would imagine most of the time would not have happened. You cannot count on them to do what you think that they're going to do. And again, I can name entities who would say, yeah, we're collecting for this particular thing. Does the money end up going to that particular thing? Lots of the time, the answer to that is no. No, it doesn't. They may say it does. That doesn't mean it doesn't. I'm not going to, again, pick on a particular entity. And part of my reason for that is, of course, that they have the legal recourse, so that even if what you're saying is true, if they have good enough lawyers, they can mess with you in court for doing so. But I am going to tell you that largely what you're going to find is most, quote, corporate charities do not do things that you would look at and go, oh, that's wonderful. They just don't. And some of them are worse than others. What I said about the United Way, I'm not going to get into details about whether or not they do or don't do what they say that they're going to do, but I will tell you that I would bet that they're disclaimatory things that they say, that they disclaim and say, look, we try to get your money to who it's supposed to go to, but it doesn't necessarily go there. But this is what I'm trying to get across and what I want you to understand. The reality is, the second you start to incorporate charity, first of all, it's no longer charity on the part of the corporate entity. They're just passing along what you've given in terms of the largesse that you decide needs to go to various people. Secondly, they have certain ways of doing business that you might be more than a little surprised if you found out that that's how they were doing things. Thirdly, there are lots of times when there are things that they're doing would be things that you count acceptable, and other times when you would look at those things and go, yeah, that's really objectionable. I want to make it clear. You have the right and the opportunity often to give to these entities. In my mind, for the most part, you're better off giving to that homeless person, giving food to that homeless person, or finding ways to get them into shelter or whatever, than you ever would be giving to a corporate charity. Now, that's not going to help cancer, right? Research and so forth, and I don't know if there's a good way to do that. But I do know that what I'm seeing and hearing from my time in that industry, and also from others who would tell you likewise, is a lot of times they're not doing what you think they're doing. Okay, I need to go ahead and wrap up. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Thursday, the 3rd of February of 2022. That means tomorrow will be Friday, the 4th of February 2022. That's the beginning of the Sabbath at sundown on Friday for those who observe it. Hope that goes well for you if you do so. Thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on Minds, minds.com, on Locals.com, Parler, on my Facebook page if you happen to see me there. Obviously, the podcast, as I think I probably already said. Remember that you can give me a boxing glove or a rumble on Rumble. You can give me a plus or a minus on Rumble as well. You can give me a like or dislike, like a plus or a minus on Rumble, on other platforms as well if they offer that opportunity. You can comment if you choose to do that, and I will do my best to look at what you have to say and comment, and if I feel that it's reasonable, respond to it, but otherwise just kind of try and take into consideration whatever it is that you might be saying. The subject for today has been more corporate charity, and tomorrow we're going to talk Soul Survivor. And I want to say really it's Survivor as a general thing, and there are some other pieces to that, but I thought Soul Survivor was a reasonably apt name, since the sort of part of what I got that from was from something that somebody else put out there, and I thought that I wanted to sort of relate it to that among other things so that I would remember what it was about. Hope you're having a good day today. We're having not serious, but some winter weather here. We're white on the ground, but it's not really exactly snow. That having been said, again, I hope you're having a good day and that everything is going well for you and that you're moving ever closer to the weekend. And as I say, getting into that second month, that February month of the year of 2022. And obviously, I would love to see you again on Friday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This podcast was recorded on Thursday, the 3rd of February of 2022. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.